Okay, well, welcome. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this Friday morning for the very last day of, I think, a really excellent winter breakout. Thank you, John. The sessions have been fabulous. And if you didn't just hear, if you missed something that you really wanted to see, they're all on YouTube. And I've already been in. They look beautiful. We are talking about Fight the Slump. This is a session that we did in November, but there's always new ideas, and it was such a persistent concern for people that we thought we would do it one more time. So I'm going to share my screen. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes. I'll try and keep it short, and then we're going to hear from some of our really excellent colleagues in the classroom. Soma Mesheng-Fraser from Creative Writing, Femi Damkachi from Chemistry, Mallory Bauer from Everything and First Year Programs, and Lynn Blanchfield from History. So thank you to our four colleagues who've agreed to share their thoughts, and then hopefully we'll have time to talk together as well. So what initiated this session to start with? The first was that in class, we did a survey of faculty and staff, and by far the biggest area of concern that faculty raised was student engagement in class. By a huge margin, that was the biggest concern raised. And in talking with students, we have a class advisory board that we had an in-depth conversation with them, and in talking to students in other venues as well, there were a number of things that came up about why students were having such difficulty engaging in class. And when I say engaging in class, I mean that in a very broad sense. Showing up to class, keeping themselves organized and getting things in virtual classes, turning on their cameras and being able to speak up, trying to run away when there are breakout rooms, like leaving because I can't talk to people, not speaking up in class, in face-to-face classes. So all kinds of different engagement. And the student insights that were shared with us, here's a list of some of the themes that came up. One was that the students that I talked with said that this last semester was a transitional semester for them, that they had, and the most students I was talking to were juniors and seniors. So they felt like they had kind of figured out how to be a face-to-face student in their freshman year, and then like things went remote and they were trying to figure out how to do that. And then they were coming back to campus for more of a face-to-face experience this last fall semester, and they were trying to figure that out again. So they felt like the ground was constantly shifting under them and that they weren't able to build skills in this kind of stepwise fashion that we usually get with a student experience. By the way, with faculty, what I was hearing was a similar theme, but really different. Also a transitional semester, but a transition back to something that faculty were more comfortable with. Not the same, but a closer analog to what they were more comfortable with, which is because as faculty, we have a long experience in higher ed, whereas our students have a short experience in higher ed. So it's not a situation that they had developed comfort in that they were coming back to. It was another new thing. Students across the board identified a lot of issues with time management, and part of that was that they hadn't developed skills that were appropriate for the kinds of classes that were being delivered to them. That time management strategies for asynchronous classes are different than from synchronous ones, that are different from face-to-face ones. It takes different skills. They express a lot of loss of confidence in their own abilities and their abilities to speak up and to engage. A lot of talk about burnout. They said across the board that the workload feels heavier, which closely ties into the time management struggles. You know that it's much easier to manage your time if you're dealing with a more restricted range of activities. As your workload grows, your time management strategies fall apart and you have to develop more sophisticated ones. They were having a mismatch between the bit of time management that they felt like they really had and this huge amount of workload they felt they had. A restricted or non-existent social circle from not being able to interact with peers in a normal way also was affecting their engagement in class. You know, that students get a lot of motivation from interaction with peers, even if those are not peers in the same class, and just not having friends. was affecting their ability to engage in class. And then this one that I think is appropriately termed existential anxiety. Like, the world is falling apart is their feeling. And when you're 20 and trying to imagine a hopeful future, if you feel like even that things are in limbo, it can be difficult to organize yourself and motivate yourself when you're not sure where your future is heading. This is not one of our students. This was actually from a Washington Post article, but it summed up some of the themes. And like, this is a hopeful student, but I could easily see one of our students saying this, that people are happy to be back on campus from this last fall, but it's really, really overwhelming after spending the past year trying to figure out how to learn from home and now adjusting back. The workload seems heavier than usual, she said. We're all just trying to catch up. And in terms of the national scope, we're also hearing this as a concern in high schools and across universities across the country. So this is not an issue with our students. This is an issue with all students, and not just college students, high school students as well. Across the country, we are also seeing reports of increased mental health concerns, but not necessarily clinical diagnoses. It's not clear exactly why there wasn't a similar kind of increase. It may just be a time lag. But there were definitely baseline higher levels of suicidality. Baseline as in coming into the pandemic, there were higher levels of suicidality with kind of the traditional college age students surveyed in 2020, about a quarter of them reporting having seriously considered suicide. And I also wanted to share the Indiana University's Beginning College Survey of students. They do this survey every year. It's kind of like the NESI, if you look at NESI data. They survey in this last go around 35,000 incoming freshmen across the country, and they asked them about the impact of the pandemic. This was the question: as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, to what extent, if any, have you experienced an increase in the following? So I'm going to draw your attention. The two left bars are very much and quite a bit. So if we look at the two left bars, very much and quite a bit, mental and emotional exhaustion were the strongest response, that about half of the respondents said they'd seen a significant increase in mental and emotional exhaustion. But in the other areas, about a quarter to a third of students responding said that they had seen an increase in loneliness and sleep disruption and depression and hopelessness and inability to concentrate. And these were the entering freshmen from our last year. So students were coming in with a much higher baseline of already being exhausted and hopeless and having difficulties concentrating right at the moment that they were starting college, instead of coming in with the usual energy that we would see for a freshman student. So our goals for today are for us to share a better understanding of what's going on with our students and some strategies that are more likely to be successful in class with them. And, you know, a recognition that no matter what you do, sometimes some students are not in a position to be able to respond in the same way that they typically do. So we can do everything that we can do, that we can think of, to boost student engagement. And then students also have agency to choose to respond to that, or to file it away as like, this professor cares about me. It's a safe place to engage when I'm ready to do that. So we're going to hear from our four excellent colleagues. I'm going to stop sharing. And we're going to start with Soma. I'm going to pass the baton to you.
Baton accepted, thank you. So thanks so much, Kristen. And research indicates, as I said last time we got together to talk about this, that Kristen set us each up for success by having the speakers present briefly, because the average audience's attention span is now just 7 minutes. 5 years ago, it was 20, not anymore. And that, coupled with the pandemic-related withdrawal and anxiety, can be a real challenge in an hour and a half long class. But the silver lining of the finding is that it takes the pressure off of us as educators a bit, rather than feeling I've got to stand there and lecture or present through most of a class. For instance, I've begun structuring more of my lectures as questions. And so far it's worked to engage the students. I will present briefly, making eye contact, trying to be very physically engaging, and then start asking pointed questions, building from what I've prepared and making the students do the work. I have also prepared a list of correct answers so I can chime back in as needed, but most often a student will provide the right answer. So I repeat it in slightly different words to help it sink in and move on to the next question. Making the students do my work that way has resulted in engagement from most of them. But then there were last semester when I thought, the 2020 and spring 2021 doldrums are going to be, a little bit lighter this semester. Not the case. I think many of us found that. Kristen's statistics underscore why. And this semester, an extremely capable student was missing class, submitting work late. When she was present, she would often lay her head down and just close her eyes. And I thought, does she hate this class and wish I had never been born? Then I reminded myself of how much time I spent as an undergraduate thinking about my own professors as people, mulling over the course content in depth. None. The professors were a collective feature of the university, sort of like desks. And if I didn't complete an assignment or was having a hard time, laid my head down, it usually had nothing to do with the class itself. So I gave that class an amnesty week in which to submit missed work for partial credit. And afterwards, a number of students came forward, told me how much they appreciated it and why. More than one had struggled with housing situations. Quite a few had moved into medical singles, more than I would have certainly expected due to mental health issues. And then the capable student that I was certain just hated the class asked me to hug her in the women's bathroom. She said that she found her writing extremely important as catharsis and as something she wanted to do later in her life, and thanked me for giving her the opportunity to do the work. So I later got an email from Lisa Evaneski, our Title IX coordinator, requesting flexibility for the student. And I put two and two together. And ultimately, I decided that this is a very hard time, and I'm going to always give students as many chances as possible to get the work done and learn the material. I don't want to be chasing after students and grading missed work all semester, so pre-planned but unannounced amnesty days are something I will keep using. And finally, as professors, we sometimes feel, or at least I do, that the more we have our students do, the better we're doing our job. But I'll close with something Laura Donnelly, the creative writing program director, said to me that really shook me out of that illogical mindset. She said, my motto this semester is slower and less. And thinking about the periods in my own education when I really absorbed, new knowledge, new skills. They weren't when I was frantic about getting 10 things done before 11 p.m. So slower and less, I think, gives us permission to make our students do some of our lecture work, give them structured second chances to get the material down and pare down to the essential, teaching maybe 5 crucial need to know things rather than 15 nice to know ones. So that has been working for me this semester, and I hope it's useful and look forward to hearing what's been working for y'all. Thank you.
Thank you, Soma. Thank you so much. Tammy, let's hear from you next.
Hi, I want to talk 3 different things. The first one is I will just continue what Soma said is, it is life and it happens. That's my motto. And with that, when you look at the student type that we have in Oswego, about 40% of our students are Pell Grant recipients. Pell Grant recipients means they're financially highly challenged, okay? And 40% is really high number. And when we look at our students, about 25% are first generation college students. So that means they don't have the support from their family, what to do, what to expect, and when things go wrong, how they don't have the support services that the parents can help. So from that point, when something bad happened in our students' life, which are more likely to happen because they don't have the financial support to resolve those issues immediately as others, or they don't have the support services or knowledge how to act. For example, sometimes things happen, they don't know how to ask for help, who to ask for help, and what to do, how to talk to the faculty members. And sometimes as faculty members, what we do is we just don't give extensions, or we just, hey, I want to be fair. And in order to be fair, you have to do these things. If you don't, you fail. However, in order to be fair, I mean, fairness is like, we use this word a lot, but I mean, being a fair is like loaded word, to be honest with you. So if you really want to be a fair, then if you don't know that student's situation, you don't know how that student is different than another student in your classroom. So sometimes being a fair means giving the extension for that student. And I will give you guys an example. So a couple of years ago, one of my female students came and said she had to go home immediately. She didn't give any reasons, anything, and she was an average student. And then she said, it's a personal, I have to be home. I can't be at class. I will miss class. I know I will miss quiz. And that's it. I mean, officially, I don't have to give any extension or anything, and I can give 0 for that quiz because there's no official reason for her not to be in class. She just came and said, I can't be in class. I have to go home. She left. I said, okay, you just go home. Let me know a week later. We'll figure it out. So a week later, she came back. I give her the quiz that she's supposed to take outside of the class time. And then a couple of weeks later, she said she had to go back home again. She went back home. She came back. And at the end of the semester, she passed my class. But then she came and she talked to me that I was the only person as a faculty member who gave her the extended time and then also allowed her to take these quizzes. So she ended up dropping 2 of her courses that semester. And I said, what was going on at home? And I learned that student has an abusive father and mother needed a support person at home. She had to go back and she didn't want to tell this to everybody. And that's it. That is the story. I mean, but I learned this all the story after the fact. Now, I mean, you can't be fair to the student just saying that, oh, you have to take this or bring me an official document. I mean, so we have to be understanding of our student body and sometimes be flexible. And these days, especially after COVID, a lot of families do have struggles. It can be financial struggles. It can be psychological struggles at home or with the students. So my motto is usually, it is life, things happen. So I try to be really easy with the students and try to give them extra hope with that. The second thing is, and that comes with the trust. So we should show the students that we trust them. And also the other side is they have to trust in us. So how do you build that trust? Because according to research, student engagement in the classroom increases if the student trusts the faculty. So how do you build that trust? I think there are 2 things we can do in the classroom. So one is, what I started doing is last 4 or 5 years is I started talking about myself in the first class, who is Fehmi Damkasi outside of the classroom, okay? And that doesn't just include your academic experiences, but your social life, what you do, what your interests are, what do you like to do, and all of those. So what that does is it brings a personal of you. And then that also opens up personal connections with the students. If they have the same interests with you, if they like the same movie, same song, or same things to do. And I remember that my conversations with the students out of the classroom increased significantly since I started doing that, because they stop you, they stop at your office, they start talking. Hey, remember you talk about this in class? I also do that, or something like that. And then the conversation keeps going, and then that builds trust. And that building trust increases the engagement in the classroom, because now they like you, they trust you, they know you personally at a personal level. And the other side is if we know our students personally, we trust them more too. So, and how you can do that, there are a couple ways we can do it. If it's a small class, you can distribute a small card stack for them to write a couple things about themselves. The other one is you can use Blackboard's discussion board if you don't want to do physical activity in the classroom. And then you can read these things later at your spare time, and then you can learn a lot about the students. And be honest with you, I learned a lot just from I used Blackboard discussion boards, and so that I don't have to take time from the classroom time, but I learned a lot of little details about the course, so I can make jokes in the classroom, or I can pick on the kids. Oh, I remember that you know how to cook this and this. So what, and something like, so you connect some of these details, then they know that you read them. Then that it shows that you care about them. So the other thing that I just recently learned that, I mean, a couple of sessions ago, is mentoring at the moment. That is the, I think the wording that they used. And I like that idea. I mean, I didn't use it, but it looks like we can actually shape students' life. Sometimes we see the students like they change, they look sad, there's something going on in their life. We can see that, we witness that, okay? But we don't say anything to the students. We just teach our classes and go away. Maybe it is better we just stop by like 1 minute and ask them, how are you doing? I see something is different with you. So that way, just even like a 1 minute conversation, right there at that moment, may make a big difference. And that's what they said, that the research actually suggests that maybe sometimes like a 1 minute conversation, right at that moment, you don't have to schedule anything, you don't have to do anything, just you see it, and then you act on it and just say a couple things, maybe just a couple good things, or maybe just you notice that something is different, may change the student's life. So that's what I wanted to have.
Thank you, Femi. Thank you. Mallory Bauer, let's hear your perspective.
Okay, so I will preface this with saying that I teach first year courses, all of which are capped at 19. So I have the luxury of having very small sections and being able to create kind of a community of trust in those classrooms where everybody knows each other. But that is something that I spend a lot of time front loading in our classrooms, is getting to know you activities, which I know not everyone has the luxury to spend a lot of time on those things. But for us, it's really important in those first year sections. I approach them with the lens of students are whole people. This is just one part of their lives, because I don't want people to think that my job is the only part of me. So I afford that to students too. They have other things going on, and I let them know that. And I always say, you know, we're going to meet you where you are, not where we want you to be. I think we have these ideas of where students should be. And then when our expectations aren't met, it kind of crushes us as educators. So I think really paying attention to the skills that students are coming in with. We do have some obstacles that we'll be dealing with over the next few years, maybe even a decade, of impacts from the pandemic. To echo what Kristen said about mental health for our traditional age college students, our high school students coming in, the AAP, the American Association of Pediatrics, said that we're in a state of emergency for 18 to 24-year-olds in terms of mental health. So really keeping those things in the back of my brain as I'm setting the scene for the course. So to echo Soma and Femi, I do a lot of the same things in my classroom. I really try to scaffold some of the skill building, and if there's something I absolutely need them to master and learn, we do it in class. I don't leave it up to them to be on their own. I really have more of a flipped classroom model, and I structure it in the following way. So every class I start with a warm-up. It's either something that's related to the content or just kind of a silly opening activity. especially if students aren't comfortable talking in discussions or they're not interacting with each other. Something I like to do is something called a consensus building activity, which students seem to love for whatever reason. It stirs up a little bit of debate. It's kind of silly, but it gets them talking to each other. So I'll throw up a question on a PowerPoint or on the board, something silly like, what is the best ice cream flavor of all time? And students have 5 minutes to work together to come to consensus about the best ice cream flavor of all time. So they have to talk to each other. So you can start to see like who's a little more assertive, who's a little more withdrawn, who's like the quiet champion who's like, oh, hey, Thomas, I noticed that you haven't contributed yet. Like, what do you think? So I kind of keep notes and keep track of who's participating, and I make it a requirement that everyone has to contribute in some way. And I just kind of track that as we go. And they get some like participation points for being part of that warm-up activity. But by, the first 3 or 4 weeks of class, they've gotten to know each other's interests a little bit. They've learned how to have a friendly debate about silly topics, but as we move into course topics that will require some real thought and care, they've been able to practice that in a more low stakes way. So that helps to get them warmed up. Sometimes I'll just have them free write as they walk in the door. I'll have a question up on the board about something we're learning about in class. They can like research things on their phone or like catch up with whatever they need and just do some free writing, and then we'll have a discussion about it. So I always get them warmed up before we jump right in. Then I'll usually have like a brief discussion about whatever the warm-up was about. I'll do a very brief setting the scene kind of lecture, similar to what Soma does. It's not a lecture, but it's really questions, getting them thinking about something. We're going to take a look at this concept. Now I want this group to get on your phones, get on your laptop, research everything you can about XYZ, and then I'll have an activity for them to work together on. Sometimes I have them work individually because I know some students thrive a little bit more when they're able to work on their own. So I do give them the option some days to work in a group or by themselves, as long as they're plugging away at the questions during class and engaging in some way. I allow them to do that in a way that's comfortable for them. And then by the end of class, we do kind of a wrap-up reflection, almost like a minute paper or like a sticking point paper, like what did you learn? And some days during the semester, sometimes it's like, hey, what are you struggling with outside of class? How can I help? Doing those check-ins throughout the semester, because we know it's been a tough couple of years. So I try to do those check-ins too. Something that has really helped me, and I know not everyone is comfortable doing this, and that's okay. I'm very upfront with students about things I'm struggling with. We did an activity. It was my social justice class this semester. We did the identity wheel, the social identity wheel, and I shared mine first. I co-taught with Tycho Kelly. She shared hers as well. We talked through parts of our identity that we struggle with, that we really identify with, talked about how other people see us in the world, but we also I shared about how sometimes I struggle with anxiety. And when I'm having a high anxiety day, I may not perform as well as other days. My struggles as a parent during the pandemic and having to cancel class or move it online at the last minute. So after those discussions, students self-identified, about 75% of my class openly said that they are struggling with issues of mental health, anxiety, depression, and some with some food issues. So that was really eye-opening for me, but I don't think they would have shared that unless we offered that up ourselves. Again, I know not everyone is comfortable sharing those personal bits in their classes, but it really helped me to see where students were coming from and helped me to adjust my class accordingly.
Thank you, Mallory. And now let's hear from Lynn.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm just going to echo exactly what my colleagues said. They all had really good suggestions. And again, it's about your own class and how many students you had. Fortunately for me last semester, I had 3 relatively small classes. I also engaged with the first year experience with Mallory and teach a first choice class in the fall. So I have 19 first year students, and then I have an intro honors class and then an upper level. So a couple of things that I do in classes, one of which is I learned actually from reading a Chronicle of Higher Ed article, I think it was last year, where the author stated that we're always very concerned about our students and where they are academically, and how the pandemic is going to affect them in terms of their skill level, as Mallory mentioned. And what struck me about the article was that instead of thinking about the students always being behind academically, that we have to meet them where they are. So Mallory mentioned this, and that she does this in her classes. The way that affected me was I actually had to pause in a couple of my classes and ask questions of the students about things that I assumed they had known about or that they had learned in high school. And this happened last semester in my honors class, where there was some topic, I forget what it was exactly, where I said, you're aware of this topic, right? Can we move on and talk about, the implications of this for our reading? And the students said, yeah, we didn't learn this in high school. Our senior year was really horrible. It was not what they expected. They didn't get the rigorous kinds of classes they were hoping for. Many of them felt unprepared for college, both socially and academically, and mentally as well. And so they revealed to me that their senior year was not exactly what they were hoping for, and therefore they didn't feel ready. So instead of going ahead with my regular lesson, I said, okay, let's just take a pause here and let's talk about, what happened last year. And also take a pause and think about how we can help you get to where you need to be so that you can understand what we have planned for the day. And being someone who I've taught for many, many years, and I was confident enough to say, okay, let's just take a pause and let's revisit some concepts here so that you're able to figure out what we need to do next with the class lesson. So the lesson there, I think I learned, was meeting the students where they are, being able to take a pause and say, okay, they're not academically where I was expecting them to be. That's okay. And instead of thinking of them as always being behind and needing to catch up with things because of what they're missing, think of what they have and flip it and make it a positive, thinking, okay, this is something we need to take a break with. We need to address this. We need to enable our students to learn things that perhaps they weren't getting in high school that we were expecting them to learn. So I think that was something that was very helpful for me. And I realized this teaching first year students last semester, that they really were very affected by their senior year. I think meeting them where they are was a very useful tool for me. The other thing I was fortunate enough to do last semester, which of course we can't all do because we have larger classes, was I did have a chance to meet all of the students individually, particularly in my first choice class last semester. And rather than just let them come to me, I made a point of making individual appointments with each one of my students, which I regularly do in the first choice class. And even though many of them didn't really want to come and see me individually, I made them do it anyway, just to get a sense of, who they are, what they're struggling with. And I think what Femi said was this development of trust, that we have to learn to trust them and they have to learn to trust us, was a very good point, because I think those individual meetings with students really enable them to realize that I'm a person, that I'm there for them, that I can help them, that I understand what they're struggling with. If they care to reveal that, I don't pressure them to mention anything specific, but if they wish to reveal something to me, I'm happy to do so. And meeting with them, I think, early in the semester was really critical, because that way I can actually figure out, well, what do I need to do differently in the classroom? What do I need to address? How can I help these students throughout the rest of the semester? And as it turns out, I did, as a follow-up, which we don't often get, I did get an email just last week from a student in my first choice class from last semester who said, I want you to write me this letter. And I said, I'd be happy to. And I said, can I ask why you're asking me? And I felt like in the class, she was relatively quiet student, and I met with her a couple of times. But I said, so why are you asking me for this particular letter of recommendation? And she said, well, it's because you really showed that you cared about us in class. And I feel like I can trust you. And I feel like you're somebody who actually took the time to get to know me. And that made me really happy to know that I had had that effect on her, that she felt confident enough and trusted me enough to come to me and ask for this letter. And we don't often get that kind of validation from our students. You know, they leave us at the end of the semester and then we don't hear from them again, or they stop by in the spring and say hello. But that was actually a really good moment for me to show that actually what I did with that class perhaps had an effect. And that's something else I learned, is that sometimes we won't know the effect we have on our students until much later. And sometimes we have to wait. Sometimes we'll never get that validation. Sometimes we'll never get that thank you that we hope to get at some point. But just getting one student to say, you know, you took the time to get to know us and you really cared about us as individuals, made me realize that there are probably other students who feel the same way, who just didn't want to say anything, or just, you know, they're not thinking about us in that way. One other point I would make that perhaps, Kristen, you're going to mention anyway, but something that struck me the last time we did this session in the fall was something that really stuck with me throughout the remainder of the fall semester, was we can only reach out to students so much. And we can only try to engage with them and reach out to them so many times before we have to say, I've done enough. I've done everything I can do. I've contacted all the people I need to contact to try and help the student return to class and finish, or to engage with class. And at a certain point, we just have to say, we've done enough, and it's okay to let that student go. So thank you, Kristen, for that bit of advice, because that was really powerful for me, because I did have a couple of students last semester who just completely disappeared. And as much as I tried to reach out to their advisors and other people they knew, and tried to reach out to the students themselves many times, trying to get them to come back to class, and trying to get them help, whether it was mental health help or physical health help, they just didn't come back. And I just had to, I remembered that and said, yeah, I have to let that go, right? I've done everything I can. We've all done everything we can to try and reach these students. Let's hope that they learned something from this, and perhaps they'll have a better semester in the spring. And as it turns out, when I was looking at my class list the other day, one of those students is going to take my class in the spring. So fingers crossed, this student is going to continue with the class and will perhaps do better this time. But he's starting fresh, and I intend to talk with him before class and say, you know, I'm here for you. Let's start fresh. Don't worry about last semester. Let's focus on the future. Let's focus on what you can do in this class, and move ahead. So thank you for that bit of advice, Kristen.
Thank you. Thank you to all 4 of our excellent panelists. So I'm going to share, just because it's helpful for me when I hear such good ideas all together, it's helpful for me to look at a summary. So this is the summary based on what I was hearing, and you can disagree, say there was better stuff, but that's okay. So these are the kinds of themes that I was hearing. The importance of personal awareness and connection. Know your students and let them know you. If you're going to do the SALT book for this coming spring, it's a theme that students learn better in a trusting environment. And when we trust our students, we also work with them better. Focus on the essentials, including focusing on the essentials in class time. That was a good point, Mallory, that if something is really essential, you can do it in class. And the motto for the year, slower and less if we can manage it. A non-judgmental attitude. And I think you heard that from all 4 of our excellent panelists. Being fair doesn't mean that everyone is treated the same. Scaffold participation through lower stakes engagement. Mallory had a great example of her consensus building activity, and you could also hear that in the themes of our other faculty as well. Meet our students where they are, not where we want them to be. Sometimes when we talk about students that are struggling, we talk about them only from a deficit perspective. And students who are struggling also have a lot of strengths. So we may see them from our perspective through our single lens. But that's where we want them to be. It's not where they are. So for example, if you have a first generation student who's struggling with in college because they don't have the knowledge base, the secret knowledge that we all know helps college students, they have a lot of other assets that they are bringing with them. A huge amount of resilience, often a lot of family support. That's a broader network. And part of meeting our students where they are is also recognizing that they bring a bunch of assets. We have no idea what they are. And understanding our students and knowing them helps us to kind of touch those assets and say, look at all these strengths that I was not anticipating that my students would have. We don't always know the effect we have on our students until much later. I think that's an important theme too. And we can only reach out to students so much. They do have agency about whether to respond. We don't know what's happening in their lives. You know, sometimes you have in your own life, you let things slide sometimes when you have more important priorities, and it's not other people's business sometimes how you make those decisions. Our students have the same agency to be able to prioritize the things that are most important to them. I also really appreciated this underlying theme. You could hear it in all four people who were talking. They don't take stuff personally. If a student is having a really complicated life and not engaging well, like, it's not your fault. Why get all bent out of shape? That is their issue. You know, as Soma said, you know, students don't always see their faculty as like a full, well-rounded person who actually, I had the same experience, my tiny one. I was surprised when my doctoral advisor showed up to my graduation because I didn't think that she like cared enough about me. And clearly she did. She advised me for years. Why was I surprised? I have no idea. And then one little piece that was also a theme that I want to draw attention to is to refresh your engagement toolkit. One of the reasons that these four handpicked people that I asked these faculty to talk is that they are, you can hear how sophisticated all of them are in their pedagogy and their approach to class. So the themes that become more important when you have a strong engagement toolkit are these overarching themes of trust and a non-judgmental attitude and meeting our students where they are. But they're also drawing from these engagement strategies they've developed over a long time. Like Soma, you mentioned the importance of being able to shift gears quickly. Like you do this, you engage this way, you ask a question, you tell a story, like you have these different things going on because you can pull from an engagement toolkit. So you're not doing the same thing all the time. Mallory, I appreciated how you shared your approach to class. Like you have this structure to the class that pulls students in this non-confrontational, low stakes way, gets them ready for other kinds of engagement. You have this robust engagement toolkit, because if here, I'm gonna stop sharing. If you're depending on doing the same things that you always do, no matter, even if they're really awesome, they don't work the same way if you always do them, right? So I do, for example, I do a lot of think, pair, share in class. I often skip the think part. There's pros and cons to that. But I do a lot of pair, share. And it works really well. But when I try something different, you can see their eyes kind of light up. They're like, oh, we're doing something different. So having a variety of things to choose from. Let's brainstorm. If you want to put it in the chat or just speak up, what are some of your favorite go-tos for a quick engagement change of gears in class? You see their energy lagging, you see them kind of not engaging in the same way. What are some things that you pull from I'm going to do this different thing?
Well, being a historian, Jackie's got something in the chat. Get up and move around. That's a great idea.
Yes.
Being a historian and being a historian of the Middle Ages, a lot of our sources are not written down. So I love showing images to students and have them engage with pretty pictures or sculptures, or I'll actually pass around replicas of sculptures or paintings for them to look at. And I won't say anything and just say, okay, so what do you see? What are you looking at? And that sometimes triggers some interesting thoughts. So that's a good idea too.
Excellent. And I'm going to read out the chat since I know it won't be caught in the recording. So yes, Mallory says quizzes and polls, anything that lets them use their phones in a constructive way. Jackie says get up and move around, interactive activities in small groups. Other thoughts?
I don't fight technology anymore. So anyway, they can use their laptops or their phones to not be doing other things during your class. That seems to work pretty well most times. And some of that, because I teach first year students, some of that means teaching them how to use like the Google Drive suite. So a lot of times we'll create PowerPoints together in class, and I'll kind of watch them as they're constructing them. We learn about, you know, good slide construction. We learn about how to collaborate in a Google Doc. So using that in class too has been really helpful for me. And for the quieter students who thrive when they can be writing their ideas instead of in discussion, you can see them just going to town.
And most of my favorite engagement tools are super easy and quick. There are things like there's been noise. So let's, like, people have been talking. So let's change that. Let's spend a minute writing, just 1 minute, write down, you know, a question that you have, or 2 questions that you have about this material, or one thing that you thought was interesting. Or there's been just me talking. So now we're going to do a, you know, think of one question out of this material, tell your neighbor that one question and see if you can come up with an answer. Or we've been sitting very still. So sometimes I like to teach really large classes. I enjoy large classes. So sometimes there's not a lot of room to move around, but if you've been sitting very still, you can do a turn to your neighbor that's behind you and in front of you, and it involves a lot more physical activity. Or you can do a pointing activity. You know, if you agree, opinion question, who thinks this and who thinks this, point this way or point that way, even if you're stuck in chairs and you can't move that much. Telling a personal story changes tempo very quickly. And you hear this in really excellent speakers, right? Bill Clinton was my favorite example of this. He's a great public speaker, but he was very good about facts, story, facts, story. So it changes, you're lecturing, you're talking about something that's very high level, stick in a story, whether or not it's particularly relevant. They don't usually care, because what you're trying to do is refresh their attention, refresh the way that they're listening. Some other comments: going to special collections at the library, or heading to other rooms on campus. Let's hear two more ideas. What do you pull out of your toolbox when you see the energy going down?
I will sometimes trip in front of the class, and it sounds ridiculous, but it usually gets their attention if I'm like doing something and I sort of stumble a bit and then make a comment about being clumsy.
Which is literally like a change in energy and attention, like a dramatic one, right then. It just refreshes attention.
Depending on the concepts, I always just make sure I have enough dry erase markers that we occasionally do Pictionary. Like if there's concepts that it's just sort of like everybody's really close but not quite there, I can just give each group a different concept. And Intro to Political Theory gets real entertaining when students are trying to do it through Pictionary. So that usually will liven things up a bit.
I appreciate that you shared what class you could do that with. Like, we're not talking about a class where there's a lot of visual images that are a close tie, right? Excellent, excellent. Before we end, there are two resources that I want to share with you. One is, and I'm gonna put them in the chat, but it occurs to me that the chat won't be captured. So hold on, I'm going to share one slide just real quick so that it will be captured in the recording. Just two quick resources. One is the Concern Navigator. I'm sharing this one mostly because it's still really new. So a lot of people don't know about it or haven't, or they knew and then they forgot about it. The Concern Navigator is an index of potential concerns that students might have and resources that attach to that concern. It doesn't say like how to handle that concern. It's more like student has body image concerns. Here's 3 resources on campus. Student has concerns about academic performance. Here's 5 resources on campus. You don't have to, I know that faculty often are making a lot of referrals for students. Here's your concern. Did you know we have this resource on campus? And sometimes we've got stuff that you don't know we've got. So it's there on the Concern Navigator. And then we did not talk about how all of these things that are driving issues with student engagement right now are also affecting faculty. But I just want to say, we have an EAP. It's free and totally confidential, and no one will know if you access the EAP. Not that, I mean, if you want to share, that's perfectly fine, but it's completely confidential. It's not associated with campus. It's a state resource. You should know there are resources. There are resources. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing again. So thank you all so much. Thank you to our panelists for sharing their experiences, their fabulous activities, and anything. Oh, wait. I want to read 2 more things. Soma says, as an engagement strategy, 2-minute debates are on something they've studied or read. Excellent. So they're not so freaked out because it's something they're prepared to talk about. Embedding short YouTube video links and lectures from Nick. It's a good prompt for discussion if the class is slow that day, and generally not too hard to do, right? A 2-minute search can bring you at least a little 30-second clip. And Mallory notes that the Dean of Students has also created an awesome financial well-being resource for students on the web. So excellent. Thank you all. It's great to see you all. Good luck this spring semester.
Thank you.